Well, you just got into PRS, you're super excited, you got a rifle, and maybe you've shot a few matches with off-the-shelf ammo. Now you're taking that dive into reloading. Hi everyone, it's the 4Gun Guy. And even though I've done some videos on reloading and my specific reloading steps, I wanted to focus today on a very narrow topic. That topic is neck tension. And it's really, really important. And what I've seen in the past, actually year, at some matches, and then in conversations with some new shooters, new reloaders, I should say, recently, I realized that it's still kind of a fuzzy topic for some people. So I thought we'd go over that today. What I want to do is take you through some observations that I've made in matches and with talking to people. I want to talk about what is neck tension. What do we mean by that? And let's keep things simple, right? Let's just have a conversation here. Then I put together a little spreadsheet. You know me, I like my spreadsheets. But I put together a spreadsheet that takes us through a new case when you get it, a fired case after you've fired it, what we do to that fired case to resize it, and then what the end result is from a neck tension standpoint. And we'll just have some casual conversation along the way. So if you're ready to go, let's get started. Now, I want to talk about why I thought about this and why it's important. About 6 months ago, I was at a match. I'm picking up brass for a guy, and all of a sudden, the rifle doesn't go off. Okay, he opens the bolt, and all you hear is, that's the powder from his case dropping down his magazine and ricocheting off all the rounds that are still remaining in it. I told him to stop right there. We looked at it. I already realized there's a bullet in the lands probably, because he was probably seating into the lands. And that's a whole nother conversation, right? Seating depth. But the case came out. He came off the line. We safely got the bullet out of the rifling. And then he said, I don't know what the problem is. This happened to me earlier or the other day as well. I said, okay. I said, let me see some of your rounds. So he opens up his case. I pick up a case and I pull the bullet right out of it. I just pulled the bullet out of the case. And I said, what's your neck tension? And he looked at me like I was from Mars. And he said, well, what do you mean neck tension? I said, well, what are you setting your neck tension at? 2000s? Nothing? Because this looks like it's almost nothing. Maybe a half a thousandth? Maybe you're right there. And he said, I don't know. I said, okay, so let's stop. And then we had a conversation. Now, fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, some of my friends are getting into reloading now. And we were in a I was in a phone conversation with one of them. And he was asking me about the dies I use and my process. And we started talking about this. And it was clear that he needed some help trying to figure all this out, right? Well, when I started getting into, are you going to full length size your case and then mandrel it separately? Or are you going to do it all in one fell swoop? What are you going to use? Like, I'm not sure yet what I'm even thinking about doing. So we had a conversation. That's why I think this is a really important video. I know I'm kind of babbling, but I just want you to understand the importance here, especially if you're just getting into reloading. Let's have a basic conversation now about what we mean by this neck tension thing. Well, let's take a new piece of brass. This is a brand new piece of Alpha 6mm BRA brass. I just ordered 500 cases from them. I like Alpha. They do really good brass. I use them for my 6.5 Creedmoor and they were great. I plan on getting probably about 15 to 20 firings out of each case here if I treat everything right. Now, when they send me this brass, they've already done some things to it. They have sized it so it will fit in a specification, a SAMI spec chamber. They then, the brass manufacturers, look at those specs and they say, okay, we're going to make a case that will safely fit into that chamber with some tolerances, right? They're not going to make a case that is exactly to that chamber. There may be some differences as that chamber is reamed. So you have to have some tolerances there. So I get this case. All I need to do is prime, powder, seat a bullet. Again, all within the safety standards of what you're going to use. Powder-wise, you have to think about all that stuff. But within those standards, and then I need to go out and I'll fire it. Once I fire this round once, sometimes it takes twice, this will fire form. You'll hear that term, fire forming. It will fire form this case to my chamber. In other words, this case will fill my chamber. Why? Because there's about 58 to 61,000 pounds per square inch of pressure once you pull that trigger. And this case expands. There's only one way the bullet can go. It's out that barrel. And when it does, it expands this neck. This neck opens up. So we've got an initial neck diameter with a bullet in it. I fire this round and this neck expands. That's what's happening. When I get that fired case home, I now have a fired case. And if I were to try to put a bullet in this, it will fall right through this neck into the bottom of the case. There's no tension in the neck to hold the bullet in place. Now we hear the term neck tension. That's what we mean by that. The tension of this neck to hold that bullet in place. And you just can't say, okay, well, I'll just cram this thing down and I'll shove a bullet in there and then I'll be great. You can have too much neck tension. You can have too little neck tension, and I've seen that before as well. So, this is what we're going to be talking about, and I want to take you through, with numbers next, what each one of these numbers means, the tools that we're going to use to get those numbers, and some options for you. You can do things in individual steps. You can do things all in one step. It's just going to depend on what you like to do. I'm going to tell you what I do. You do not have to follow that. So let's do this. Let's switch now to the spreadsheet that I put together. You'll see, let's go through the numbers first, then we'll go through those tools that I was talking about that you'll use to actually do the resizing and the mandreling so you can get the right neck tension. Well, let's talk some actual numbers here. So again, I'm using my 6mm BRA for this example, and I'm going to put my spreadsheet up here next to me right there. So let's go through that new brass first. So we fired, actually right here, we've got our new brass. But before we load it, look at what we're talking about. The external, the neck diameter outside is 0.2670. Now, I also want you to notice some things next to these numbers. Those are the plus or minus, right? Because this stuff isn't perfect. It's not perfect. But, so the neck diameter is 0.2670. The neck wall thickness is 13 thousandths of an inch. That's each side of the neck. So if I put both those together and going forward, we're going to assume that I'm just multiplying both measurements of that neck by 2. So that's 26 thousandths of an inch. And if you subtract that from the 0.2670, you get the neck diameter internal, right? And by the way, it does measure that internally. So you can just say, okay, the internal of the neck is 0.2410. If my bullet is 0.243 inches, then what is that giving us? That is giving us a neck tension of 2/1000ths of an inch. There's 2/1000ths of an inch difference between the diameter of the bullet, 0.243 up there at the top, and 0.241, which is the inside neck diameter, right? So right out of the gate, alpha brass is giving us 2/1000ths neck tension, which is great. Now, we load it in a rifle, we send it down the tube, we take that brass, we come back to the shop, and now we've got this piece of brass. This piece of brass has an outside neck diameter of 0.2730, right? In other words, look off to the right, that neck has expanded in the outside diameter by 0.006 of an inch, okay? The wall thickness remains roughly the same throughout all this stuff. I rarely lose any wall thickness, but so wall thickness overall, right? 0.0260. The neck diameter now in the inside of this neck, if I measure it, is 0.2470. My bullet's 0.2430. I now have, 0.2430. I now have basically 0.004 negative neck tension. 0.004, right? Which is why what I told you earlier, if you take a fired case and you put the bullet in it, it's going to drop right through it because you have no neck tension, right? There is none. Then we resize our brass, we do what we do to it, and I'm going to walk through why I do what I do here. So I full length size my brass. And what I've done is I have brought that neck in, right? So I have neck tension, among other things to the brass. So now, if you look at this, you will see that the bushing I'm using in my full length neck sizing die, this has the bushing in here. It's a little bushing. And I've got different sizes, right? This is a 0.269 here that I could use if I wanted to. But I'm using the 0.268 bushing. And that sits up in this full length die. It kind of rattles around because you don't want it so tight. You want it to float in there. And again, remember, there's a lot of other things going on here. When we size this brass and I put this thing up in here, I am actually bumping this shoulder back a little bit, but then this bushing is closing in this neck. Now I'm kind of beating this horse to death. I'm going to come back to what you can do. So now we have sized it, and when I resize it, I am bringing it back to this die this bushing actually gives me 0.2660. It's because things aren't perfect. So I have a 0.007 neck reduction. Okay, the die should give me 0.005. It's not perfect. It's giving me 0.007. I have a wall thickness of what it was, 0.0260. I now have a neck diameter of 0.2400 inches. So my neck diameter in my resized case is 0.2400, which, if you look off to the right, gives me a 0.003 of an inch neck tension. Now, after that, I mandrel. So I have a mandreling die here, right? And if I open this thing up, you will see that this is what it looks like. if that'll focus. It's a mandrel, okay? This thing, need to clean it. This thing then, the case comes up in here. This mandrel, in fact, it's going up there right now, I can feel it. This mandrel expands the neck. That's what that does, because I do this separately. So when I mandrel the neck with my mandreling die, with the insert that is 0.2415 inches, which is what? Larger than the 2.400 inches by 1.5 thousandth of an inch, I actually come out with a neck diameter internally, very last thing there, of 0.2405. If I look at my bullet, that gives me 2.5 thousandths of an inch of neck tension. So this is how all these numbers work out, right? Do this, because it will become clearer to you when you do. Now, let's pause here. Let's pause. What I just told you was, I do these in separate steps. I full length size, and then I mandrel. I double mandrel. When I run this thing, when I run this case through this, I do it twice. Once, come up, twice, come up. I have another video for my 6.5 Creedmoor where everything stayed the same, but when I double mandreled, my SDs were half of what they were with a single mandrel, and my ESs were, I think, almost half of what they were with single mandreling. I've just gotten in that habit. It's just what I do, and I can't get out of it. So that's what I do. If you don't want to double mandrel and you want to just do everything in one fell swoop, then you would get a full length sizing die, and you could have the decapping pin that sticks right out of it with the expander ball on it, right? And that looks like this. Okay, so here's the all-in-one die. This is a retting die, sizing die. And you can see that I've got a decapping pin here, which would be used to deprime the brass. But then if I take this apart, what we're going to see is, I've got some parts in there, I'll come back to those. I've got my bushing, my sizing bushing right here, that is going to then sit down into the die. I'm going to put this piece on, but before I do, remember the bushing in here now is to take the neck smaller, right? However, as we run the brass through, so the brass comes up, that bushing is going to bring the neck in. But what you don't realize is this is the expander mandrel that's built into this. And because it's smaller than the size of the neck after it was fired, it easily goes through the neck. Then what happens is we size the neck down, and now this mandrel, this ball, is now larger than the sized neck. And so when we bring the case back out, it's running over this mandrel, and the mandrel is expanding it back out to our desired diameter. And by the way, as we brought the brass down to size it, this decapping pin decapped or deprimed the brass. So that's how this all-in-one would work. So you could use an all-in-one if you just want to do everything in one fell swoop. Let's talk about the, why you might want to do it the way I do it, why you might want to do it this other way. Look, an all-in-one, man, this will save you some time, right? I know some really good shooters that have gone back to this. They don't do it separately anymore. I just can't do that. I don't know why, I just can't. I like the idea of doing my separate steps, because to me, it's that whole quality control thing for me. I get to control the full length sizing of it. Then I get to control the mandreling of it. And to me, that's just how I like to work. So either way will work for you. It's really going to be your personal preference. Now let's talk about the numbers that we looked at. If you look at those numbers, now I'll put them back up here. I'm not overworking this brass. I'm getting it to a point, right? You have to full length, you have to resize it, right? You have to close in that neck. So you have the two options that help you do that. It's the bushing in the sizing die, and then it's the mandrel in the die, in the expander die. So I'm just saying, keep those two numbers close. Don't really tighten up that neck by a lot, and then try to expand it with a mandrel back out for, say, 2/1000ths or 3/1000ths bullet tension. You're going to be overworking that brass, even if you anneal every time like I do. Just be careful of that. I think that's my biggest thing here. All right, well, I think, this is, I don't know how short this video was. I've done a whole lot of takes on it. But this is just one of those topics that I think is very, very important. Do your spreadsheet like I did. Think about this stuff. Think about those 3 stages. We've got new brass. We just fired our brass. Now we've resized our brass. At the end of the day, once you resize that first firing, now you're just in that firing resizing cycle, right? The new is out of the way. Some guys check their neck tension when they get brand new brass, and they may open it up. They may resize it even. I don't do that. I haven't heard of many who do. But I think, if it's something that you want to play around with, I guess you could. Just be very careful. Don't put too much tension on that bullet. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks again for watching, everyone. The subscriptions, comments, likes, really love all that. I've got a lot of other things coming up, as you can see below. More practice videos as the weather is going to permit. And until next time, shoot straight.